Welcome to Sustainability Matters. I'm Tria Case. Today's topic is rising waters. We all remember the horrors of Hurricane Sandy and Ida, all slamming us within the last decade. The trend is clear. Today's severe storms are more common, the ice caps are melting faster than scientists predicted, and the waters are rising. Now, New York City is focused on mitigating and adapting to rising waters with infrastructure changes and natural-based solutions. But is it enough? Today, we will address some of the challenges impacting our neighborhoods, and we'll examine many pioneering solutions that are underway in our research labs. Here's Ari Goldberg with an overview of rising sea levels at home and abroad.
Coastal zones make up only 20% or so of the land on Earth, but billions of people, about 40% of the entire world population, live within 60 miles of the coast. Now, on the other side of the ledger from these billions, sea level rise is really only measured in millimeters. Since the launch of the TOPEX Poseidon satellite in 1992, we've been able to track continuous ocean measurements down to that minuscule level. And millimeters sure don't seem like a lot on first glance. According to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, once human activity from the Industrial Revolution started to make an impact, sea levels rose on average by 1.3 millimeters a year between 1901 and 1971. And by 2006 to 2018, that increased to 3.7 millimeters a year. All told, that's a total of 0.2 meters, or about 8 inches. This is caused not just by melting ice caps and glaciers, but also the thermal expansion of the ocean's waters as our planet warms, because water expands with heat. And indeed, 8 inches may still not seem like a lot, but unfortunately, even if we were able to limit Earth's warming to the global target of 1.5 degrees Celsius, scientists are confident that what we've already done is going to keep waters rising throughout the century anyway, and perhaps 2 to 3 meters over the next 2,000 years. But even the ramifications of 8 inches are already tangible. Consider how much infrastructure lays underground, already often susceptible to flooding. Sanitation, water systems, power lines, subways. And with higher average sea levels, extreme sea level events like storm surges and flooding are more likely, damaging shipping and supply chains and displacing populations. To that end, the IPCC projects that extreme events that currently occur only once every 100 years are expected to happen at least annually in many places by 2100. Shoreline environmental ecosystems are at risk as well, from changing coral reefs to flooding islands. Indeed, 2019 saw Australia's Bramble Cay Malomies described as the first animal to become extinct from sea level rise, as its island habitat was destroyed with surging ocean water. To be sure, small islands like that, and island nations, face the greatest immediate existential threats from sea level rise. But after Hurricane Sandy, we all know how vulnerable big metropolises like New York can be as well. And over the years, several plans have been laid out to improve New York's sea level resilience, a microcosm for different strategies being employed around the world. There are ecosystem rejuvenation efforts, like the Billion Oyster Project to restore NYC's oyster population, and the Newtown Creek Alliance to restore the creek's natural marsh habitats, both providing natural protection against water surges. There have been planned relocation projects, like the Build It Back program in the wake of Sandy, which, in part, provided funds for at-risk Staten Islanders to move farther inland. And there have been infrastructure projects, undoubtedly the most visible being the Big U, a $1.5 billion barrier currently being built around Lower Manhattan, literally raising the height of the island's coastline. There have also been calls for greater protections for the city's poorer populations in neighborhoods more at risk to rising sea levels, like working-class populations on the Lower East Side and communities in Jamaica Bay. And certainly, the environmental justice implications surrounding resiliency initiatives are major considerations as we look to the future. Because while it may only be millimeters at a time for now, New York's waters are in fact one of the places that are rising faster than the world's average. For Sustainability Matters, I'm Ari Goldberg.
And now, here's our first guest, Dr. Michael Menser, who's the director of the Urban Sustainability Program at Brooklyn College and associate director for public engagement for the Science and Resilience Institute at Jamaica Bay. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Tria. Very excited to be here.
Thanks for coming. So we've been talking a lot about why waters are rising, where waters are rising, but can you talk to us a little bit about how are the rising waters affecting our communities here in New York?
Absolutely. So sea level rise, the intensifying storms. I've had water in my house from Ida, from Irene. I lost power during Isaias and Sandy. I couldn't get to work at many of those different points. We've seen coastal flooding that disrupts supply chains so that your grocery store, your local bodega, the shelves are empty. It hits the transportation system in terms of delays, in terms of safety. We've all in New York, right, gone down the steps going into a subway and the water's coming with us and we're kind of wondering what we're going into. So there's multi-dimensional impacts from this, living by the sea. We're a city of islands, right? And to be able to navigate that is an existential question. I mean, what does it mean to dwell in New York City in this time where there's such ecological transformation? And my home department is philosophy, so we like to think about those existential questions and what does it really mean to be in this kind of moment? And also, when this stuff happens across scales of not just the city, but the region and the globe, supply chains are impacted. That impacts on jobs, it impacts on prices with the food crisis and so on. And then on our financial insurance systems. And there's the whole question of our flood insurance right now and who has to buy it and what flood map am I supposed to be following. So the rising sea levels and the intensifying storms is really, it's penetrating and unfortunately corroding a lot of different types of infrastructures and frameworks that we utilize in our lives in many different ways.
So you're part of a group that formed the Climate Justice Hub.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Where did that come from and who's part of that group and how are you helping to address these issues?
Absolutely. So the New York City Climate Justice Hub is a partnership between the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, which is a membership network of environmental justice grassroots organizations from across the city, been around for 3 decades. And we've partnered with them. We were connected to them actually by the Waverly Street Foundation, who had a proposal from them and also had a proposal from us that we had generated from a conference that actually you spoke at about 1.5 years ago, which was trying to connect folks working on these issues across CUNY. And we had a proposal to do a climate democracy process across CUNY to try and connect folks and partner. And then we got this opportunity through Waverly Street to connect with NEJA in particular, the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance. So we were awarded the grant this past year, and it's a $4 million grant that we split. And the idea there is really to take the expertise and the students and the programming and curriculum at CUNY, which we're already trying to adapt to this moment, and utilize it to support the members and the campaigns that the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance works on, from climate to energy to water to coastal protection to climate jobs and so on. And really then specifically to take particular classes and have their members be partners with these classes, to create research teams at CUNY that help to work on specific campaigns, like the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which has really changed the landscape in New York State. And then also, though, to develop a cohort of students who could be the new generation of leaders to really work on these issues going forward.
And I think you touched on this a little bit with your hat on as a philosophy professor. Why do you think it's so important that these programs come from within these communities? Why did you think it was so important to go after this Climate Justice Hub?
Absolutely. So one real essential reason is that these are the communities that have caused the least amount of the damage, but they receive the most amount of the damage because of their vulnerability, because of histories and legacies of structural racism and other kinds of economic disadvantage. And so there's a deep moral and political reason for this. These are also communities who have been through it numerous times and have experience and have expertise and have ideas about how to proceed. And in this time right now where, we have to intersect the climate crisis with a lot of other crises and challenges that are happening in our culture and in our political system. And when we think about racial justice right now and economic democracy, to be able to bring these issues into the climate space to make sure that we're approaching the climate challenge in a way that builds in racial justice and what I would call economic democracy and participatory democracy. That's one of my philosophical areas of research. So that we're sharing assets, sharing resources, and having people at the table with power, not people who are just consulting or advising, but have real power in decision-making processes. And we're seeing glimpses of this now in some of the New York State processes that were recent legislation that's been passed in the last couple of years. But we really got to continue to really work on that and deepen that as the state and the city and the country and the globe go forward on this.
When you think about the students that are taking your classes or are across CUNY, what are some of the skills that you think that they should be building, and what types of courses and jobs do you see for them as you think about what needs to happen in order to address these issues?
Right. Well, as the director of Urban Sustainability Program at Brooklyn College, which has been around for almost 10 years now, even in those 10 years, we've seen new job titles emerge. From the sustainability manager position in a business to someone who's got experience or expertise in resilience or sustainability as a planner. And there are new positions that we're seeing. I know you've just shown the wind sector, and like these new jobs that are happening when you build giant turbines, off the coast, and people have to rappel alongside them, which is incredible. So there's also these kind of new jobs that we're seeing around solar, or around storage, or around wind. But then there's also jobs that have always been around or been around for a long time. In marketing, for example, one of my favorite graduates from Brooklyn College, although I love them all, she's in marketing, right? And so she's helping and marketing a sense of how do we get the public to be more aware of these kinds of options that they have when it comes to HVAC or energy or retrofitting your apartment. So there's a range of jobs that we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of innovation in terms of new programs at CUNY, including at Brooklyn College, where we're creating a new master's program in environmental justice and sustainability. We've seen new programs at John Jay in environmental justice, at City College, at Baruch, at LaGuardia Community College, which is one of our partners in this New York City Climate Justice Hub, along with the CUNY Grad Center. And so there's an incredible range of opportunities across disciplines and fields.
You talked earlier about your own experiences during the various hurricanes and storms that have hit us here in New York City. What are some things that you would suggest that we can all do, that people can do in their own homes, in their own businesses, to try to address this?
Right. Well, we just spent the last several weeks of my environmental ethics class on this issue, so this is a very live question. I like to think about it, and learned a lot from what students want to hear about this too. There's short term, there's medium term, there's long term. There's small scale in my house or in my office or at my school. And then there's larger scale that maybe at the state or national level. And so what I really think is, pick spaces or try out spaces for collective action. Really find out what are organizations that are already doing this work in my area or in an issue area that I'm interested in, like coastal flood protection or green infrastructure or renewable energy. And go to their meetings, find out what they're doing, listen to them, stick it out, go to several, right? It can be dizzying at first or confusing at first, but I feel like really connecting with your local organizations is a great way of learning, and then you meet other people and you start to connect with that. And right now, these problems are so daunting, and I really find that I've seen that a lot of people who try to do individual things at home, which can be important, but it also can be isolating when you're just kind of doing your own recyclables and and try to reduce, turning off lights all the times or reducing this, to really join with other folks at nonprofits. It could be at your workplace. It could be, again, with a neighborhood-based organization or a larger nonprofit or something much more grassroots that we see in the food system, for example, with composting. And there's such a range of issues, and then pick it and stick it out a little bit. Try it out for a little bit. And there's been so much legislation passed lately, too, that if you're interested in that kind of work at the state level and at the city level, there's a lot of opportunities to connect through coalitions and campaigns like New York Renews, for example.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for that. It's, I guess we should all pick something and do what we can do. Right? Stick with it. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your expertise and for being here with us today.
It was a pleasure.
And now we go to Jamaica Bay, where surrounding neighborhoods are severely impacted by rising waters, and where many stakeholders have come together to collaborate on building resilience and sustainability in their community and beyond. Mariev Amy reports.
Known as the city's rainforest, Jamaica Bay's Wildlife Refuge supports diverse habitats and hosts a variety of bird species, fishes, and other wildlife. However, it has been threatened by heavy urbanization, pollution, and rising water levels. Restoring this vital area is crucial, not only to preserve its ecosystem, but also to protect the surrounding low-lying populated areas from severe floods.
During storms, the marsh can oftentimes absorb the force of that storm and absorb a lot of that water before it ends up in the neighborhoods behind it. So in a place like Jamaica Bay, where we've lost a lot of marsh, and we've also built on top of them and out towards that edge, we've sort of lost that buffering capacity. So restoring some of that marshland buffer between us and the sea could help reduce our exposure and our vulnerability to flooding.
Brett Branco directs the Science and Resilience Institute at Jamaica Bay, a collaborative effort involving CUNY, the National Park Service, and the City of New York. This research center focuses on climate adaptation, providing vital knowledge to preserve the region's diverse ecological environment.
So one nature-based solution to flood protection is, instead of building a seawall, you can build some kind of coastal protection structure that integrates natural components to it. People refer to these things as living shorelines or natural nature-based features, but they're basically structures that integrate nature as part of the protection.
Anil Pasram is a stewardship coordinator at Jamaica Bay Rockaway Parks Conservancy, where he actively restores the shore.
After Superstorm Sandy, there was a breach in the path. In 2017, it was restored, and in 2021, we started the Living Shoreline Project. We planted 200,000 plants of native grasses and shrubs, 100 fascines created from recycled Christmas trees, breakwaters that came from the Billion Oyster Project, and included 15 core logs, all to fortify the breach.
Shoreline restoration solutions often involve a combination of natural approaches and the use of durable materials.
You know, an example of a nature-based solution is maybe you build a buried seawall under a dune and then put natural habitat on top of that. But in some places, you might not be able to get away from just building a straight seawall between you and the ocean. Or as another example, you know, the Army Corps has proposed hurricane gates that can close to prevent storm surge from entering a place like Jamaica Bay during an event like a hurricane or a major storm like a nor'easter.
The Institute also created tools for communities to gather data on floodings, like FloodNet and FloodWatch.
So FloodWatch is a project where we engage communities in documenting the flooding that they're experiencing through photos and through dialogues. And we also use it as a way to provide communities with advanced flood warning, potential flooding events that they might experience. And this program provides opportunities to exchange knowledge across academia, you know, the research community, the government, and the communities that are actually experiencing the flooding. And then FloodNet is a project where we're installing sensors that can passively detect flooding when it happens on the streets. And this can send alerts to people about flooding as it's happening in real time. And it also gives us better information about the depth of the flooding and the duration of the flooding that people are experiencing at the moment.
The gathered data showed that low-lying areas near the shore are experiencing increasingly severe sunny day flooding during high tides. This escalation is due to rising sea levels and reflects the urgent need to address climate change and its impact on vulnerable communities.
What we're learning is that we have to do a lot more research and collect a lot more data on these projects so we can really see what affects the success and the failure of some of these natural and nature-based features. And we need to learn from those and then make sure that that learning gets transferred to other places around the country and it reaches other end users and other practitioners.
Wetlands need the help. These are jobs that are important, and for this very reason, my conservancy started the Wetlands Fellowship Program. It's a program we're aiming to expand, and living in Jamaica Bay, I've grown up here, and it's one of those areas that it may be fraught, but people love it. It's a public access area, and it's just one of those areas we have to keep alive.
For Sustainability Matters, I'm Marie Vami.
We now welcome our second guest, Reza Khanbilvardi. He's a NOAA Chair Professor of Civil Engineering at the City College of New York and the Director of the CUNY Crest Institute. Reza, welcome. Thank you for coming and joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So you've been researching this field for decades?
3 decades.
3 decades. If you're to think about major breakthroughs, what would you say have been the most recent breakthroughs that you're most excited about?
Well, I mean, in the last 20 years, satellite technology become one of the major technology that was brought into the picture to be able to collect the data, analyze the data, and understand the Earth system sciences the way it is. And later on, the drone and unmanned aircraft vehicles came in. And lately, the AI is one of the major elements that is coming to the picture that we're using for a number of issues that requires ingestion of a large number of data from different sources and different scales.
Is there a particular effort that you're most excited about?
You mentioned about the policy makers. One of the bridge between the science and policy makers are really the communities and the stakeholders. And a lot of announcement that's coming out of federal government for future research are geared toward engaging communities in the science, especially climate adaptation one. Because without the community, it's very hard to convince a policymaker to make some changes in the policy. The one example of those, we just, CUNY Crest Institute became part of the Caribbean Climate Adaptation Network that works with the communities in Caribbean and also Puerto Rico and US Virgin Island to deal with the climate adaptation. Another one, we're looking at the development of AI and develop the flood risk map for New York City. How can we have a system that all the data that comes in, and we have a lot of sensors in the field for many years in New York City and from satellites on the grounds, ingesting all this data coming in and putting an AI layer on it so it can make a decision for us if it's going to rain tonight or tomorrow, which area is going to have flash floods, to give the warning to the community.
In your institute, what are the areas that you're encouraging students to focus on so that we can have the next generation of professionals who can help respond to this issue?
In the last 2 decades, we have been training students to be workforce ready. I always tell them that try to get your education in the traditional field, which is civil engineering, environmental engineering, GIS, earth system and environmental sciences, but also try to learn other what they call soft skill. Soft skill include data analysis, include communication of risks, includes understanding to society's needs and adaptation to those changes. And in the last 2 decades, we have been able to train and produce more than 1,000 students, both undergraduate, master, and PhD, related to extreme events. And extreme events could be drought, could be water issue, could be coastal flooding, could be extreme heats. And United Nations is recognizing those as major elements on a global scale.
Mm-hmm. You recently spoke at a United Nations event.
I attended the main one, but I spoke on what we call the symposium part of it. United Nations really stepped up to the plate because we never had it on a global water conference for 47 years, which means the world overlooked the water issue. And United Nations brought it back with having this conference, which was about March of 23 in New York City, to the attention of on a global scale that water is important. In 2015, UN developed what they call Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them for United Nations, and they call it Sustainable Development Goals of 2030. That means by 2030, they should have achieved many goals. This number 6 of that one is water. Water is a global issue. It's not a localized, it's not even regional. What happens in Africa, in Asia, it's going to impact us. It is on the food chain, supply, it's on economic development, it is on migration. A lot of people are going to migrate, and displacement of people, and sometimes cause war, conflicts, because of the massive amount of people are moving for economic developments in other places, and that causes a problem. So we have to recognize that the water is a global issue.
Thank you so much, Risa, for coming in and sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is all the time we have for today. You can find out more about career options on the Department of Energy website and explore the many courses, undergraduate and graduate degrees that CUNY has to offer at cuny.edu. Thank you for watching, and tune in next month when we'll discuss the New York City grid.